As we continue to watch and monitor events in Russia, U.S. and other global intelligence agencies have been working overtime to try to make sense of what transpired today within Russia's own borders and to determine any threats that might exist now, new, bigger, lesser, to impact the balance of the global community. I want to bring in someone who knows the answer to a lot of the questions we've been asking. Michael McFaul, the former U.S. ambassador to Russia, and lucky for us, an MSNBC international affairs analyst. General Barry McCaffrey and Jason Beardsley are still with us as well. Ambassador McFaul, I haven't been able to get a straight answer, but would you guess that U.S. intelligence, who have been pretty successfully predicting a lot of what's gone on in Russia, had a decent sense that this was going to transpire today?
Well, we're guessing, Nicole. That's right. But I think they probably have good sources, as we know, especially as we learned in the run-up to this disastrous invasion of Ukraine. My sense from talking to government officials is that they knew there were splits there, that knew there might be something like this. But the extraordinary events that we've just witnessed over the last 24 hours, and they're not done yet, I don't think they would have guessed and known that this would all unfold the way it did, because I don't think Vladimir Putin or Mr. Prigozhin knew that it was going to unfold the way that it just did.
And Ambassador McFaul, in terms of sort of mapping out a post-today strategy, what is the bigger geopolitical earthquake, Prigozhin, or what it reveals about his willingness to humiliate Putin on the world stage?
I think the biggest takeaway is that Putin comes out of this crisis much weaker than he was before. This has been building. We've talked about it before. I think this war in general has weakened Putin's rule inside and most certainly is standing around the world. But think about what we just witnessed. Two armed forces that used to be loyal to Putin threatening to go to war with each other. And then who comes to save Mr. Putin? Lukashenko, the guy that's supposed to be subordinate to Mr. Putin. And I want to, you're playing it right now. I've watched that clip many, many times. I've watched Mr. Putin for many, many decades now. He called Prigozhin a traitor, and he called him a traitor to all of the Russian people, right? Think about it like President Biden getting on television from the Oval Office talking about Osama bin Laden or something like that, going back to George W. Bush. And then 6 hours later, he cuts a deal with the guy, drops the charges, and he's allowed now to go freely to Belarus. That is a very weak look. And if you watch, as I do, and listen to what people are saying on various social media channels inside Russia, both the opposition and the pro-war camps, they look at Putin as being very weak today.
Yeah, Ambassador McFaul, something that people have noted, and we've talked about a little bit, is that perhaps the worst sign for Putin was the cheering and welcoming that Prigozhin got along the way and the support he had from the Russian people. What does Putin do about that?
I think that's a really important point. If you listen to Prigozhin, I listen to his channel all the time. He's the real populist nationalist, talking about the corrupt elite. He's part of that corrupt elite, of course, but he talks in a way that appeals to them. He talks in a way that appeals to soldiers. Remember, he's a thug. He's a criminal. He's done horrific things. I want to be clear how I feel about him. But his soldiers fought in the trenches with Russian soldiers in Ukraine, and that gives him a following with the soldiers, the privates, not the generals as well. And as his forces were leaving Rostov, you're showing that right now, they were cheered. And as the police reappeared, they have been scolded and chastised by the people there. If you're Vladimir Putin, those are very dangerous things to be watching.
Something we've talked about a little bit, but I just want to underscore it. Russia's military has been carrying out atrocities. They've carried out war crimes in Bucha. And Prigozhin's mercenaries are known to be more brutal and more violent. So it's not really that we're rooting for one side or the other, are we, Ambassador McFaul?
No. This is one thug fighting with another thug. There's no heroes here. This notion that they were avoiding bloodshed, give me a break. Prigozhin hasn't been afraid of bloodshed for his entire career. They played a game of chicken, and everybody thought they're better off not to fight. But no, they're all criminals. The fact that they're fighting amongst themselves is better than fighting Ukrainians. But there are no heroes here. That's for sure.
General McCaffrey, what opportunities might the allies or the Pentagon, along with the Ukrainians, be looking to exploit at this moment where Putin is, at best, distracted by an act of what he described 10 hours ago of treason?
Well, I agree with almost everything Ambassador McFall said. One thing I would add is the huge level of distrust among Russian generals and colonels. I've dealt with them a lot, and it was always amusing to me. They trusted me far more than each other. We'd be the only ones that would give them an insight into how their own weapon systems worked and how their air defense worked. It was they had a love affair with the Americans and not with each other. So there's a huge level of distrust, which is toxic to any military formation. So I think that distrust now has gone up. They all stood on the sidelines there trying to figure out who was about to win this struggle. Prigozhin finally figured out he'd lost his cards there. He laid them down. He's exiting stage left, but there's still distrust. I think the other thing that we ought to take out of this is that the Russian people, Ambassador McFall knows far more about this than I do. The economy's in the trash. They're a political pariah in the international community. The billionaires, the oligarchs, can't go summer on the Riviera anymore. So this place is a real mess. Putin still has the National Guard, the riot police, the FSB, and the Ministry of the Interior. You've got maybe 4,000 people keeping him personally safe in his isolated country, Dhaka. So in the short run, maybe we're not going to see a collapse of the system, but Putin is clearly in a weakened state, and that's good news for the West and good news for Ukraine.
Yeah, and Nicole,
David, go ahead.
If I may, yeah, you had asked a question that I think both Ambassador McFall and General McCaffrey really tee up well. What can the West do about this? And I think you have an advantage here and a window of opportunity for the diplomats to really go to work and seize on the perceived vulnerabilities of Vladimir Putin, who, again, is sitting on top of a nuclear arsenal. We really ought to be pushing now harder than ever for looking towards an end of this, some sort of a negotiated settlement, particularly while Vladimir Putin is perceived to be at his weakest. It's the most maximal gains we'll be able to get eking out this deal. And I think the White House has an opportunity to go to work on this one right now.
I want to ask all of you, I've been wondering this, I haven't been able to get an answer. Who, if anyone, is talking to Moscow today? I have to sneak in a quick break. I'm going to ask all of you to stick around.